picking what to say no to is the most important thing that you can do. That could be financial gains. It could be customer asks. It could be any number of things, or things going in your personal life or whatever. You've got to be able to clear away the clutter and be really focused.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Founder Real Talk. I am Josh Broward. I'm your host, CEO of Wisdom Partners. We're hosting this party, and in case you haven't joined us before, the whole point of Founder Real Talk is to normalize the struggle and bring out into the open more of the roller coaster ride, the real roller coaster ride that founders go on in this journey that is so addictive and sometimes torturous, but heck of a lot of fun. And so today we have an experienced founder, multi-time founder, Matt Hudson. These days, he's given his energy to Build It, which is a software platform. It's a mobile-first e-commerce visual experience engine that lets brands and agencies build fast, personalized storefronts and app experiences. If I understand correctly, it customizes the website or app or user experience to the actual user. So I'm excited to dig in. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate you having me. And I feel problem number one is I got put in air quotes. You know, as a founder, not a good sign.
I'm a coach. Just level the playing field.
Yeah, to sort of get ahead of the question, since you put it in air quotes, the visual experience engine aspect of Build It. What we saw in the market was a problem that people want to build personalized websites, and it's very hard to do that performantly. Very hard to give a personalized experience with the API-based solutions that exist right now. So when we call it a visual experience engine, the visual experience is just what you see on a web page. The homepage of an e-commerce site, or the PLP, or that's a product listing page for non-e-commerce people. It's the main pieces you shop. A lot of what is called personalization today is just product listings. But what about the promotional content that exists on those pages? What about if I'm not an e-commerce site and I want to provide a different experience for grandmas than their grandkids? You know, my dream is that a marketing person can make a customized, personalized marketing campaign for 90 or 100 different types of segments with one person. And with our paradigm shift in the way that we treat content and deliver it, we can do that. It can still be highly performant. It can still be personalized. And of course, with the advent of AI and some of the things that are out there, we can even generate that content in their brand voice. So, you know, my dream is that someday that everybody gets a slightly different experience, and not just the promotional content, but also, you know, the navigation and the font sizes, or, you know, all sorts of various things. And then, you know, how we won the future of mock. Mock is a e-commerce paradigm that allows best of breed. We won a pitch contest based on the concept of, well, what's going to happen to these websites when they get into ChatGPT? Right now, you're just delivering text, which reminds me of the days when I was a kid and I was running a BBS. I ran a 2-line BBS, and programmers were all excited that we had Fido mail. Well, that's ChatGPT today. A lot of people that experience websites, they want the experience. They don't want to chat. Now, if you talk to men, you know, it's different. We buy differently. But a lot of people, a lot of women in particular, want to buy based on the experience. They want to be inspired by the Polo, Ralph Lauren kind of content. And if ChatGPT knows you, Josh, and they know that you love Hawaiian shirts because you are a cliche VC, then not only are they giving you personalized products, but they're also giving you the inspiring Tommy Bahama model that we will never look like, but that makes you want to buy. And that's an actually important aspect, is that if chat is going to own the glass, then we have to deliver more than just a text-based solution, programmers, you know, to the customers. So that's what the dream of Build It is in the immediate term, making a highly personalized website where when you land on a site that has Hawaiian shirts, that not only is the product the first thing that shows up, but the inspirational 20% off Tommy Bahama, shirt shows up. And then also eventually in your ChatGPT, that not only does it show you Tommy Bahama products, but it also shows you what's on sale and, all the visual aspects of it and all the aspirational kind of pieces of promotions that are important. The 5 P's of retail are product, placement, promotion, price, and people. And right now, in my opinion, the chat has left out the people. And it's definitely left out the promotion. Okay, anyway, that's way bigger of an explanation than you wanted, but that's the dream.
Oh, that's great. So why does personalizing websites or shopping experiences, why does that resonate with you, Matt, on a personal level?
Well, there's a couple things. Well, let me answer that question in the proper way. Okay? And I'm going to undermine your premise. I've been in e-commerce for 13 or 14 years. Before that, I worked on Charles Schwab. Before that, I worked on Sam's Club iPad, which was also retail, I guess. So I guess technically it's like 20 years. I built e-commerce sites in like 1999, So if that counts, I guess it's even longer. To be honest with you, I don't have a passion for selling pants, But what I do have a passion for is giving people experiences that make their lives better. And what I mean by that is if I'm a single mom, okay, and I'm shopping for my kids and I'm on my, e-commerce mobile app and I have a mediocre experience or I have trouble logging in and I can't order my kids stuff because I'm in a rush, that's frustrating that I can't get my day-to-day stuff done. So I don't necessarily love selling pants, but I love giving that mom an experience that, like, one less thing to worry about. It reminds me of like opening my Mac in the days when like PCs would shut down. I just opened my Mac and I could just start working. That made my life better. I mean, literally, I was less stressed. And then I can think of times when the Kroger website, my wife was in a rush, she was stressed out, and the Kroger website would not let me log in. There was a bug. I couldn't do the MFA, and I was locked in MFA hell. And look, I did something stupid, and I punched my monitor. And I've never done that, but I was really mad. I was under a ton of stress, and I was frustrated. And that primitive sort of response, I want to eliminate that. I don't want to replace it with a stress-free response of like, God, I'm tired of logging into websites, and putting MFA, and I'm tired of not being able to click what I want and buy with one click, and I'm tired of the websites that exist out there that, yeah, they're trying to sell, but they understate the performance and the website's slow and it loads all over the place. And then on top of that, personalization just irritates the problem because it makes everything slower because you got to figure out who the user is. So, for me, I think, well, why do people need different experiences? Why is everybody getting the same experiences? I mean, for one, I recently got glasses and I recently discovered, Jesus Christ, nobody can see my website, and I didn't realize that, right? And I know it sounds dumb with ADA and whatever, but the simple fact is there's a lot of paradigms in your navigation and shopping experiences that cause people to bounce. So 92% of people that visit an e-commerce site the first time bounce and leave and probably never come back. Mm-hmm. That's money down the drain. That's ROAS down the drain. And it's not just finding the right product. It's also, did the darn thing load fast enough? So, that's why it resonates with me, because I want to make people's lives better. The experiences of either my users or the end user, or also my team. We're named Build It because we want to build great products, but also we believe in building great people.
Thank you. Let's just double tap on that one for a minute. Most startups don't spend a lot of time thinking about building great people.
That's too bad.
Yeah. So they mostly think about just building a product. So you're clearly coming at this from a different angle. Tell us why.
It's going to sound funny. Well, number one, I just have a passion for it. I just care about it. I want to contribute to the world. I want people to come to my funeral. And I read that in a book, like if you want to make a lasting impact, you got to impact people. I went to the Sam Walton School of Business. It's about people. So that's the number one. But there's actually a a funny business aspect to it that I think is really important. And I'm going to take something from sports. The New England Patriots, who defeated my LA Rams, or they were the St. Louis Rams at the time, many years ago when Tom Brady led them down the field and they kicked the damn field goal. And I, at the time, was in a college class about BI, which was basically using linear regressions to determine predictable outcomes based upon a set of attributes in a bunch of data, right? Okay, what the hell does that mean? What that means is that certain people, you can predict something based upon a set of attributes, right? And you can calculate that. And what's the most important aspect? So if I am a quarterback, the New England Patriots would use BI to determine that quarterbacks of this height, of this makeup, possibly ethnicity, arm strength, hand size, whatever, right? All of these things together have a 0.9% chance of having success. And they would use this in the draft to draft great players. And by the way, they did, and they were wildly successful. And we learned about this in my BI class, and I was freaking fascinated by that, right? That we could take a large scale amount of data and predict who was going to be great based upon these things. So when I started this business, I'm an LA Rams fan, or previously St. Louis Rams fan, and I started to notice that Sean McVay, the youngest head football coach in the NFL, who is amazing and inspirational in his own right as a leader, among many other things, and ahead of his time. But what I noticed is he would get amazing young players in the draft, and they would be far less expensive. He could make them much better and win a Super Bowl. And so I thought, well, hell, why don't we do that in business? Why don't we take the data that we have about the people that are coming on board, bring on young people or older people that are not as skilled or whatever, whoever needs the growth aspect, and train them in our ways, make them better, invest in them. As Steve Jobs said, what if we don't invest in people and keep them? I think it was Steve Jobs that said that. Some wildly important icon said that. But I think that the concept is what matters, which is if you don't invest in people, what the heck are you doing? And that is a huge amount of leverage that you have if you bring in younger people or unskilled people or whatever, and you train them up, you do right by them, you make everything better. And the more of those people that you make better, you become Michael Jordan or Sean McVay or whoever, Matthew Stafford, whoever you like, right? Whatever sport icon. If you make everybody on the team better, that leverage is undefeatable. That is the ultimate leverage you have. So my option was, well, I only raised $1 million 3 years ago. So I had a limited budget, right? So that was the number one constraint. I had to bring on people that had potential and teach them our ways. And what I found out was it was a great business decision to actually build people. Because not only was I doing right by them and doing right by my personal moral compass, but also my business was naturally getting better. So if I brought 20 young guys and women on to my team and made them all better and taught them everything I could possibly know, pay for their Udemy classes, pay for all that stuff, man, suddenly now I've got an A team and, they're happy and I'm living what I really want to do, which is make people's lives better and ultimately making my business better. So to me, it's a pretty dumb strategy to bring on a bunch of 300K guys that have big egos and then let them fight it all out, when you can do it for half of that and people get better.
Yeah.
So financially, it turned out to be really smart. I didn't anticipate that, though. I can't take credit. I got lucky.
Well, you were shrewd or strategic about how you played the cards that you had.
I am shrewd. That is true. In some ways.
When you think about the last year for Build It, what's a win that you're really proud of?
I got to be honest with you. It's been a pretty tough year. This is a bad year to ask the question. It's a bad year to ask the question. I think that the adversity that we're currently experiencing in the past few months, I think we're about to overcome that. What I like to tell my team is that, we're 2 feet from wild success and we're 1 inch from epic failure. And I think most startups are like that, capitalized or uncapitalized, whatever the situation. In fact, many mature businesses are probably closer to that than most people realize. But when you think like that, in some ways, surviving through the year is an important aspect. So we survived COVID, doubled revenue. I'm very proud of that. We grew from 2 or 3 people to 25 people. We renewed with multiple billion-dollar customers. That is not easy to do. We improved our product. We improved our people. So I'm proud of all of those things. This is not a good year for financial wins, but we have signed some big customers and to have great recovery. But what I love is some of the products that we're about to launch are going to make a big difference in our users' lives. And if we can get to our dream of the things I'm mentioning before, then I think we'll have a product that actually makes a difference. And I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Maybe the next question will be easier for this year. What is something you have learned the hard way, or some wisdom that you have earned, wrestled out of the jaws of failure?
You have to say no. Picking what to say no to is the most important thing that you can do. That could be financial gains. It could be customer asks. It could be any number of things, or things going in your personal life, or whatever. You've got to be able to clear away the clutter and be really focused. That's one challenge that I have had as a company and as a leader, is giving real clarity, because there's value in a lot of the things that we do, but you got to pick the right one. And that's what's always missed, when people talk about like overnight successes and stuff. Number one, how many shiny objects or opportunities did they pass up? How many times did they say no to being sold? Or how close were they to failure where they said no to something even though it might have elongated their runway, but then they survived and shot the moon when they found the right PMF, right? Product market fit. Yeah, saying no to, the most obvious and easiest one for any experienced founder is what features to say no to. That's the most obvious one that most people talk about, but you can always tell somebody that has been in product building or startups for a long time, because there's a direct correlation from how big they want, how many features they want in something versus their experience. If you're very experienced, you understand that the fundamentals and getting the one thing right, that's the most important thing, and you've got to be able to focus on it. And inexperienced founders will come in and be like, well, I wanted to do these 25 things. And I'm like, you don't have enough money or experience, or, and the customer's not going to care. They're not going to understand what you're doing. You got to do the one thing right.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of a time when you should have said no, or should have said no quicker, and what you learned from that?
There have been projects that looked really valuable, that looked like they were going to help us, and they ended up dragging us away from our core product, or adding features that weren't necessarily going to get used, or that just became challenging to build, or that maybe I underestimated I definitely did, underestimated how much effort it would take from the team, and that optimism that founders normally have, that I have for sure, really just came back and bit me right in the tuchus. So
we'll knock this one out real quick and move on to...
Yeah, sure. It's 3 months. It's going to be great. We're going to do it. This is 6 months later. My God, what are we doing? But yeah, there are definitely parts of different things that I should have said no to, customers I should have said no to, opportunities I should say no to too. Sometimes there's just partnerships that are like, oh, this is going to look good, and it just ends up not quite panning out.
So what have you learned about how to identify the right no's? You just said...
Not enough, Josh. I have not learned enough.
Sure, but you talked about product features or partners or things like that.
Okay, let's talk about features. I can talk about that easily.
Okay, sure. How do you decide like the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one?
Okay, let's talk about the one that affects most builders. First of all, building is the easy part. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not. Selling is the hard part, and marketing supports selling. So selling and marketing is actually together the hard part. Okay, and it's the most expensive part. Marketing's not going to save you. Building's not going to attract customers. It's just going to cost you money. So the very first thing that you must do is, if you've ever heard of the concept of Tylenol versus supplement, I've actually changed it up a little bit. It's a little edgy. One of my mentors told me, he goes, oh, if you get to 60% margin, that's like being a drug dealer. And so I started thinking, oh, okay. So it's not just supplement Tylenol, it's supplement Tylenol, legal drugs, illegal drugs. Okay? Now, I know, but listen, it's very important for founders to understand this. In the Sam Walton School of Business, we learned about the black market. If demand is high enough, people will do things illegally to do it. That's how high the demand is. Versus down here in the supplement land, I'm not going to take a supplement. Even if I own it, I sometimes don't take the supplements.
Yeah.
Right? So Illegal drugs are the kind of demand where you don't need marketing. In fact, you're hiding from your customer most of the time. Okay? That's the level of demand that like AI is generating, right? It's almost like illegal drugs. Software engineers, if they would find a way to use AI if it was illegal, they would like find a way to do it. Okay? And then there's legal drugs, which are a little bit tricky because they've got to be prescribed, whatever. So they're sort of like their own little thing over here to the side. Let's put him aside, okay? But they're in demand and they're very important and you're taking them because you have to and somebody told you to. And then you have Tylenols where somebody has a headache and yes, they will immediately go to the store to solve the headache, right? But yeah, nobody's committing any crimes to get Tylenol. Supplements you have to force me to take. If you have demand, that solves a lot of sin. So the very first thing you must do is find the one feature that has a level of demand that is at least a Tylenol. It's got to be at least a Tylenol, and that will forgive innumerable sins. If you try to make a market with supplements, your marketing is going to be a lot higher. It's going to cost enormous amounts of money to make a market. Don't try to make a market. So that's what you have to ask yourself. Survey your customers, find out what it is, but you need to think in terms of, not does it have utility? Supplements have utility. You need to think of, are people willing to commit a crime to get it? I mean, I'm joking around a little bit, but if you think about it that way, it helps you conceptualize what to build first. Solve the one problem and only that one problem. And once you do, and you get somebody to buy it 0 to 1, then you start building on as you go.
You're not surprised? I've never heard that analogy before.
Because I created it out of my mentor and some books.
Like it.
But I think it is. I don't know. You tell me, Josh. I'm going to ask you a question. Is it valid?
I mean, it definitely gets at the idea of broadly, yes. I think it's an interesting way of thinking about demand, that the wrong way to go about it is to try to generate demand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The right way to go about it is, I heard somebody say, instead of trying to turn on the money spout, I'm going to look for the place where the money is flowing and put my bucket under it.
Absolutely. The people that build bolts, that create bolts, make billions too. Don't forget that. Get the fundamentals.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is it's far more important to find a real problem than to develop a useful product.
A real problem. And by the way, this might be a slight hot take, but just because people are willing to pay for it still doesn't mean that it's solving a real problem. It just means it's solving their problem. And that makes it even harder. But if you think about, like, I've been in e-commerce for a long time, and I was always surprised when the finance team would talk about demand. I was like, what do you mean demand? Well, when you look at like holiday sales, there are shoe companies that their website will go down when that shoe drops, and they will literally wait with everything in their cart to press checkout. That's demand. So I started to understand demand, and then I started thinking about, oh, that's the level of demand that you need for products, for your software. But most people only think in terms of utility. They just think, is it useful? And that almost means nothing. I mean, it's next to nothing. So
yeah. So maybe a little bit of a shift. Help us understand what's a challenge that you're trying to solve right now. I know this has been a challenging year. So what's one of the challenges that's top of mind at this stage?
The team mix, I think this will resonate with you as somebody that talks a lot about leadership changes as the company grows, right? So I will answer your challenge problem, but as usual, I'm going to preface it with a large anecdote or story.
Excellent.
Or analogy, whatever, whichever you prefer. It'll be an anecdote that is in the form of an analogy. Overall, finding the right mix of people, right? So good to great, get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seat, right? Okay, that's an oversimplification. That's a wild oversimplification, actually. I run a software engineering team. I get great people from Brazil, Spain. I've got some guys that are in Ukraine. I've got India. I've got Americans, right? One thing I didn't anticipate is the culture of the team matters. In other words, their ethnicity, certain cultures don't necessarily work well together. Now, I personally don't like that, right? I think find a way, but there's friction there and you have to solve it. Finding exactly where somebody fits. If you're off by one and you have an architect that's doing an engineer's job, that can create a problem because he or she may be working like an architect and have value, but they may collide with the task-oriented approach in software engineering. So when you are working alone, you control everything. Okay, right? So when you're a team of one, you're the hero. Okay, when you're a team of five, possibly you have five heroes. Maybe you have a nice basketball team that shifts everything around, but unlikely. Okay, very unlikely. If you go from 5 heroes to 100 heroes, your business is going to die. If you go from 5 heroes to 5 leaders of the right mix, and by the way, introvert, extrovert also matters, like the mix of introvert, extrovert. If you go 5 heroes that learn how to operate like a team within their the teams that follow them, then you're doing well. And I think that's I'm getting close to that right now, where I have a couple teams, I've got good leaders. And then the next level up, right, which is where I think you come in as a coach to a degree, is like, okay, how do I be the leader of leaders and not just the leader of team leads? Right? And then as you go higher, you become the leader of executives, which are leaders of leaders, and it becomes harder and harder and more abstract. And you lose control. And what I have likened it to is like a chemistry set, right? Or not a chemistry set, I don't know. Like a chemistry experiment. If you mix the wrong 2 chemicals, it can explode. But the very same chemicals may be very, very good for growing in other areas. And if you think of it like initially you're the one picking the ingredients. Okay, cool, I can prevent the explosion. Okay, now you're telling the next guy, hey dude, do not mix sodium chloride and nitrous oxide or whatever. I forget what explodes. Whatever they are. I think bleach, don't mix bleach and what's the yellow stuff? That's ammonia, right? They're both very good on their own, right? But you mix them together. So then you can tell that guy, right? But then you become the leader of the next guy and you tell him, but he doesn't tell the next guy. And then boom, his team is exploding. And so you lose control. And that means you have to pick one single principle that you can send down the wire that affects everybody down the wire that says, hey, don't mix those 2 things. Or you have to have SOPs or whatever. So my point is that the challenge of getting the right people in there is solvable when it's just you. It's decently, you have some control when you're picking the team leads. But once you're the leader of leaders, it is significantly harder, and they have to have the principles of leadership that understand the spirit of what you're trying to do in order to know those things inherently down the line, or down as the abstraction gets farther and farther. So yeah, picking the right people, getting them in the right place, getting the right mix. And I look at it like a mix, not just on the bus. Because the mix is more than that. And sometimes you might add an extrovert to the team, and that may be enough to where all the introverts are able to do their work, and the guy can talk or the girl can talk or whatever, and men and women. And dude, there's so many things that you have to think about. Yeah, and then also on top of that, knowing when to ignore feedback from the team. One person has a problem with this. Or one person has a problem with this person, another person has a problem with this person, or whatever. And sometimes they're just communicating you as the leader, as your friend, or whatever the scenario is. And if you do a knee-jerk reaction, you may not have a business anymore.
Yeah.
Because people will always be communicating to you the bad and the good. And so your judgment becomes extremely important, and how those people mix together. It's way more complicated than people make it, I think.
No, I think you're right. You've talked a lot about the leadership growth journey, or you've hinted at it in several of your answers. How have you invested in yourself and in your own leadership over the last year or so?
I just listen to books. There's no substitute for great people telling you their experiences. I do think you have to have a measure of principles that you live by, where the books inform the principles, but you got to realize that those books are just giving you tactical pieces, and without the core principles, it's not going to be, you become overreactive. So you got to start with, again, the fundamentals, the principles. So I read the book Principle-Based Leadership. I've actually always been obsessed with leadership. I'm not sure where it came from, actually. Maybe my dad. I don't know why, but I've always been fascinated by human behavior and leadership. So I read the seven habits of highly effective people. I learned so much from that. So many things in there. And then I read the Principled Centered Leader. And in the Principled Centered Leader, it talks about values versus principles. And I had this weird thing that taught me a lesson, which is that the book was incredible, but I bought it for $7. And I started to realize that price is an abstraction from value, and values are an abstraction from principles. So the price I paid for that book was not the value to me. That book changed my life, and I bought it for $7 on clearance. So they're not the same thing. And then values are things that change with your environment, but the principles never change. And if you have those principles, then the books can actually help you. But if you just start with the tactics, then you don't. So how do I invest in myself? Well, I keep my principles, and then I listen, which is not indicated on this podcast. But I listen, and do my best to use my judgment and my discernment to discern how those are impacting me. And every book, I do my best to actually implement it after I read it. And I actually think that's very important. I've met many people that have read books, and they don't recite them the way that I do. And I'm like, did you read it? And I'm not sure why exactly, but I like to read a book over time, and I like to actually start implementing those things immediately. And let them affect things, and that has been very helpful to me. So, but yeah, the other investment is just standing in the fire of the forge. I'm not wild. I'm a Christian, but I'm not wildly religious, and so I'll preface it by that. But I believe strongly in Job. He talks about coming forth as gold. If you run a startup, you're gonna go through the fire, and if you come through as gold, you're gonna be great, and maybe you even get some gold, but you're gonna go through the fire. And there's no way around it, and you gotta enjoy it.
That's right. Yeah. There's I always have a hard time with the verses in the Bible that talk about rejoicing and suffering, but one part that feels particularly true for me about the startup world is connect suffering and endurance and hope. I think it's in James maybe, but it's like, okay, when you go through hard times, just understand this is building your character.
Well, there's that, but there's a simpler way to think about that too, which is that the discipline of doing something every day slowly and doing the boring stuff is also sometimes suffering, especially if you're like me, who's ADHD. It's very hard for me to be disciplined. Mm-hmm. And so that's actually part of it too. I mean, I understand that that's not necessarily what the Bible is talking about, but if you enjoy doing the same repetitive thing every day, and you're going to get better, and you will get to a point of being excellent at something. And you got to, it may not be suffering, but it is definitely boring. And that's the only way to get to the great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, David Brooks, New York Times columnist, wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And one phrase from that stands out to me is, we get to choose our suffering. Not all of it, but some of it. And
are you saying I chose this? I did.
Particularly for startup founders. Yeah. Do you want to suffer in a job where it's a enterprise bureaucracy and you don't have much say over your life? Or do you want to suffer as a startup founder and it's life and death, figuring out the money, figuring out the people? Like, every customer is make or break. Sometimes it feels that way. Every position, every job, every way of life has suffering. So sometimes it's deciding what you're willing to suffer for and embracing that this particular suffering is part of this particular journey. And it kind of makes it easier.
I would say that for me, the want to run a startup or a company, it burns inside me. And for many, many years, when my daughter was born, I decided to start a startup, but take a full-time job and kind of run the startup on the side. It was more like a hobby, to be honest. I did sell it though, the IP anyway. And when I took the job, I had been in startups since I knew my wife, and run my own company since I knew my wife. And she goes, "Why didn't we do this before?" Because suddenly I made like double, and she didn't know. She didn't know that I was a good software engineer and that I could have made double the money that I had been making, And actually I went to Charles Schwab at that time, and it was a great job, and it was like took 2-hour lunches, and as long as the market was good. But I could not do that. I stayed in the corporate world for my kids because I wanted it to be stable, but it continued to burn inside of me. And I was able to not jump in too fast, right? My wife's an accountant, so I basically prepared for 3 years. But yeah, it burned inside me to leave, and it was hard for me to be an enterprise. However, I will say this, all of my entrepreneurial skills were extremely useful in the enterprise world. And I was able to do many things that I don't know that I knew that I was capable of in that world. So, but I was an entrepreneur when I was a kid. In fact, even in the background, you see my lemonade stand smock from when I was 9 years old, right there. My mom kept the smock, and I remember to this day my brother saying, "Hey, give me the $11 you made selling lemonade." And I said, "Well, no, we need to reinvest it back into more lemonade." And he didn't understand why he wasn't getting $5.50. And so it's just funny that, like, you look back and you're like, dude, I was never not going to do this. But it is challenging. It's very challenging. And, there's definitely days where I'm like, gosh, go back to the corporate world. But, I don't know that I can't do that. So,
yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I think, sometimes we run through our questions. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. But I think we could talk for hours. And
leadership is a deep subject, buddy. And leadership in startups is too. There's so many human aspects to it. But I appreciate you having me on. And I appreciate your want to drive leadership improvements among the guys and ladies that are running startups. We need it.
Well, thank you. That's all for today for Founder Real Talk. I hope you come back. We'll hear more real stories, real struggles, real success. Keep tuning in.